Howdy, boys. This weekend we have UFC 309 Jones versus Miocic, and I'm here to give my thoughts, opinions, picks, and predictions on the card. Starting off with the fact that I think it is pretty mid for a John Jones pay-per-view event. Like, why do we have Viviane Araujo and Karine Silva, Mauricio Hoofy, and James Lontop on the goddamn main card? Nobody wants them on the main card. Hell, I think Jonathan Martinez and Marcus McGee deserve to be on the main card than those two. But nonetheless, take what we get. It'll be a good card, I have no doubt. Probably will be a little decision heavy, but still will be enjoyable. And another thing I want to talk about before I get into actually discussing the fights is the fucking custom shorts. Why do guys choose to just get gray and black shorts? You get your chance out of the 20 or 30 fighters that do get custom shorts, and you just say, oh, fuck it, just make them a shade of gray and another shade of gray and a little black. Like, you can't, at first glance, you can't even tell Stipe and Chandler's shorts are custom shorts. It's so fucking dumb to me. Maybe I'm just being an asshole, but I don't think you should be allowed to just make your custom shorts gray. That's ridiculous. I know Charles kind of look like shit and they're not gray, but hell, they look more striking than fucking Chandler's. Chandler literally ripped off Gaethje's, probably already the worst custom shorts in the sport, and he chooses to go with that style. It's fucking dumb. Why? Man, I don't understand it. It's like, give me the America shorts, but don't make them red, white, and blue. Regardless, let's talk about the fights. First fight on the card, Veronica Hardy versus Eduarda Moura. Now, both of these gals kind of fall into the category of fighters where I remember their names, and looking at the events they've been in, I know for a fact I have watched those events when they happen from top to bottom, but I don't remember any of their fights off the top of my head, or even looking at their opponents. They just didn't get into the wrinkles in my brain, didn't have enough storage space for that shit. And so I really don't have much to base my pick in this fight off of besides their records and their opponent history. And looking at them, I see that Veronica Hardy is an absolute decision merchant, and Eduarda Moura has a higher chance of finishing the fight. So I'm going to go with Moura. Although typically that kind of does backfire in WMMA. Often you kind of want to go with the decision merchant. But on the other hand, she also looks a little more mannish than Veronica Hardy, and that's kind of the way that everyone else picks fights. So I'm going to go with Eduarda Moura by, god damn it, I don't even want to say fucking finish because they're so hard to come by in WMA. But I'm going to say third round finish for Moura. That's my pick. Second fight on the card, Basil Hafez versus Oban Elliott. I'm going to go with Oban Elliott by decision. Both of these guys lean more towards decisions than finishes, and they also are more submission heavy than KO heavy. Even though Basil Hafez looks like he hits really hard and can KO guys, he only has one KO on his record. Pretty pillow-fisted. So I don't see him knocking out Oban, and I also don't see Oban knocking out Basil. So I do think it's going to go to decision. They could get a submission on each other, but both of their ground games are pretty good. Not top-notch, but they're good enough to not submit each other, I think. And Oban Elliott is all around better than Basil Hafez, just a step ahead. So yeah, I'm going with Oban by decision. Not much else to say for this fight. I don't want to get into the whole fucking, outside foot battle and shit. That's not my forte. Third fight on the card, Mickey Gall versus Ramiz Brahimaj. Man, who the fuck am I even supposed to pick in this fight? This is a battle of who is worse, Gall or Brahimaj. I don't ever want to have to pick Mickey Gall. I don't know how either of these guys are still in the UFC. They're terrible. They're absolute bottom of the barrel. And this is what I was talking about when I was saying this card is pretty mid. How are these two even on a prelim of a pay-per-view? Crazy. Now, I know Brahimaj couldn't hurt a fly with his striking. He has no KO or TKO wins. He has 10 subs, though, and I know Gall has never been subbed, and he's a decent grappler. That's his base. I don't know. Man, I hate this fight. This is a terrible fight. Hard to pick. I'm going to go with Brahimaj by getting a sub. It's the only thing he knows how to do. He has 10 of them. He has a 100% finishing rate by sub. I just can't trust Gall. He's so garbage. I mean, he looked decent, somewhat decent on the feet against Basil Hafez, but that was also Basil Hafez' his first fight after getting tested by USADA, and he didn't look as juicy and gassed up as he did. So, I don't know, man. This is one of the worst fights for picking and going to be one of the worst fights for watching on the card. But I guess it's good to pick a few underdogs. So, well, I guess I already picked one. But still, going with Ramiz. Fourth fight on the card, Marcin Tybura versus Renato Diniz. Finally, a somewhat decent fight. I'm going to be going with Renato Diniz by second or third round KO. First round's definitely going to go to Tybura. Probably going to hold him up against the cage, smudge grapple him, maybe get a well-timed takedown. Could submit him, but I just don't think it's likely. Genato's got good enough ground game to defend for long enough to where I think Tybura will slow down in the second and third round to the point where he opens himself up for a KO from Diniz. But yeah, I just think Diniz is a little too dangerous for Tybura. It is still a step up in competition. I know when he was scheduled to fight Derek Lewis, I was picking Lewis because that was a bit too much of a step up in competition. Fifth fight on the card, David Onama versus Roberto Romeo. Have no clue who Romeo is. Looked at his record and it's not impressive. So I'm going with David Onama. I'm not going to spend much more time on this because like I said, I have no idea who Roberto Romeo is, and David Onama is tested and tried and true. So I'm going with Onama by decision. Sixth fight on the card, Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson. This is another fight where I had a kind of hard time deciding who to pick. It's a pretty tough coin flip matchup. But I'm going to go with Damon Jackson. I think he can draw it out and make it pretty boring. And just rely on his grappling and being heavy on top. And when they are on the feet, using his 3-inch height advantage to kind of just dip back and stay away from dangerous strikes. Jim Miller's also really getting up there in age, and he's taking a lot of damage. I know Damon has been KO'd twice in the last couple of years, but they were KOs down a division and to two of the hardest hitting guys in the division, Ige and Topuria, which pretty much anyone could get KO'd by those guys. So I don't put too much stock into it. And Jim Miller did just have an absolute war with Bobby Green where he took a fuck ton of damage, an absolute bloodbath. So yeah, I'm going to go with Damon Jackson by decision, but I would not be completely shocked if Jim Miller pulled off some crazy Hail Mary shit in the third round. Seventh fight on the card, Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. Hats off to Eric Anders for taking this fight, knowing that he's going to get his corneas scraped right out of his eyeballs from fucking Weidman's fingernails. But in all seriousness, going with Weidman by decision. I think he's just better all around than Eric. I've never really been impressed by Eric. I don't dislike him by any means, but it just never wowed me. And even though Weidman was gouging Bruno Silva's eyes out, he was looking decent in that fight. I think even if he gets overwhelmed by Anders in the striking, he can rely on his grappling to secure the decision. Anders could put him out, though. He does have decent power, but I don't see it happening. I think Chris is just too all around. Chris is well-rounded, even though I don't like him. I have to admit that. Eighth fight on the card, Jonathan Martinez versus Marcus McGee. This was probably the hardest fight to choose on the card. I reckon it's going to be very competitive. Both these guys are quite skilled. But I'm going to be going with Marcus McGee. I think he has just a little bit more power than Jonathan Martinez and is overall more well-rounded and can mix it up if he needs to. I know it's not the most recommended thing to look too far into guys' records when picking fights, But Martinez did get TKO'd by Davey Grant in 2021. And so if you're getting TKO'd by Davey Grant, you can get KO'd by Marcus McGee. Even though I am going to be picking Marcus McGee by decision. One thing I do want to mention, though, is I do not like the fact that Marcus is 34 and still unranked in bantamweight. I wish he would have got here a little younger, man. He honestly could have probably got pretty far. I just don't see him ever becoming champ, or probably not even top 5. I think he's going to have a fall off before he gets there. Still, going to be going with Marcus. I think he can either get a decision, easily winning 2 rounds, or potentially even get a late KO. 9th fight and the opener of the main card, Mauricio Hoofy versus James Lontop. I'm going to obviously be going with Mauricio Hoofy. I think James Lontop is just going to be there to be hit for 3 rounds and eventually is going to go down. He's just not going to be able to take that damage for 3 rounds. I would argue that this is a layup fight for Hoofy, but from what we've heard from behind the scenes and shit, that no one really wanted to fight Hoofy, or that everyone was booked up and this is the only guy that they come up with. So hats off to James Lontop for actually taking this fight. Props to him. But I am going with Hoofy. I think he will get a late 2nd round or middle of 3rd round KO. He could potentially get an early sub if he drops Lontop, but seeing as how he's from South America and he just got an absolute fucking brick of a head, granite chin, I don't see him going down early. He could last this whole fight, and it could be just a masterclass decision. But Hoofy has finished every one of the fights he's won by TKO or KO. And he absolutely brutalized Jamie Mullarkey. And I know Mullarkey is no one to really brag about beating. I mean, I guess it is worthy to brag about that he absolutely destroyed Mullarkey. And I don't necessarily think Lontop is that much of a step up. So yeah, I think he's going to fuck up Mullarkey. I think he's going to fuck up Lontop. Pretty easy win for him, whether it's decision or KO. 10th fight on the card, Viviane Araujo versus Karine Silva. I'm going to be going with Karine Silva by decision. Looking over the stats for this fight, I was shocked to see that Viviane is 37. I thought she was like 32. I guess I just never really paid attention to her age on the tail of the tape. But yeah, I think Karine is a better grappler overall. She is also on a 9-fight win streak or some shit. And she has a higher chance to finish the fight. Viviane's last couple of losses aren't that bad, I will say. Losing to Natalia Silva is not a bad look at all, especially since a lot of people now, after her most recent performance, are considering her to be one of the prospects to look out for. But losing to Amanda Ribas is not great. Alexa Grasso isn't a bad loss, but I don't know. Getting decisioned by those girls does not make me want to pick you against Karine Silva. I think Karine can easily just smudge her to a decision or even outpoint her on the feet, potentially. I think she has more power in her punches. Viviane does have the volume, but we've seen plenty of times where people with power will win over volume, just causing more damage and winning the optics of the fight. So yeah, I'm going with Karine Silva by decision. I could potentially even see her getting a submission at some point. The feature fight of the card, Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig. Obviously going with Bo Nickel. I've been seeing a lot of people, the contrarians and whatnot, saying, well, Paul Craig could submit him when they go to the ground. He submitted Jamal Hill and Magomed. I don't see it going to the ground. I think Bo Nickel is going to KO Paul Craig on the feet before it even gets to the ground. And I know a lot of people like to talk shit about Bo's striking and say it's pretty goofy and shit. But then they'll be, go right around and say fucking Dricus and Yuri have great striking. Oh, well, I mean, there are plenty of people that shit on Dricus' striking. But still, he has a lot of power. I think he'll easily KO Paul on the feet. Paul does not have a chin, and his striking is abysmal. It's non-existent. So yeah, round 1 KO for Bo Nickel. Not much else to say about this fight. Even if it does go to the ground, I still think Bo is going to maul him if he goes to the ground. In the co-main event, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler 2. I think this fight is going to go very similar to the first fight, choosing Oliveira by round 2 finish. If Chandler uses any level of IQ, I genuinely think he has a chance to beat anyone in the top 10 of his division. But he is just so stuck in that for you guys mindset and the have to bleed for the fans, here for a fun time, not a long time mindset, that he's gonna lose to guys that are fucking composed and dangerous like Charles. In the first fight, nearly finished Charles in round 1, but he kind of lost his head. He should have let Charles back up immediately. Strikers always fucking do that. I know Chandler's a bit of a wrestler, so he is more of a wrestler than a striker, but still, there's so many times where you'll see a striker hurt somebody on the feet and then just fuck around on the ground instead of letting them back up. Chandler falls victim to that all the fucking time. Chandler is like up there with Kevin Holland in terms of fighters who just disappoint me the most. Like, it's so hard to be a fan of them when they just throw fights away for the stupidest shit. Like, looking back at it, he could have put Charles out in round 1. He could have put Gaethje out in round 1 if he would just dial the fuck in, lock in, stop getting silly and stupid. But, like I said, I think it's going to go really similar to the first fight. I can see Chandler hurting Oliveira, going stupid, going crazy, and just throwing it away. He doesn't have that ability like Islam does. Like, when he hurt Charles, he immediately went to the ground and found the submission, locked it up. Chandler's going to try to fucking lob bombs at him and, ground and pound him or fucking wrestle around with him. He's going to give Charles the time to recover. Maybe he doesn't make that mistake he did in the first fight of leaving his chin open when I think he threw a straight and then backed out of the exchange with his chin up and his hands down. Maybe he fixes that mistake and doesn't get KO'd as easy as he does last time. But Charles is too precise on the feet, too accurate, too fast. He'll find the finish. I'm pretty confident in that. So yeah, Charles, second round finish, just like the first fight. And in the main event, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. I have never wanted a fighter to win a fight more than I want Stipe to win this fight. It would be the funniest outcome of a fight ever. But I don't see it happening. I think Jon Jones is better almost all around than Stipe. I think Stipe is a better boxer than Jones and almost say blatantly has more power than Jones. Jones is great at using his range, at finding it and keeping it. He's one of those guys that actually can make full use of his reach. He doesn't have 84.5 inches of reach for nothing. He actually optimally uses it. I think he's also a better wrestler than Stipe. Stipe is going to give him more trouble than people are giving him credit for. Jon Jones will probably have to really work for his takedowns. Stipe can stuff a shot pretty well. Jones is probably one of the craftiest fighters of all time. He's an expert at finding ways to win, just getting around his opponent's advantages and shit. And there's the obvious things to consider that everyone is talking about in any of their prediction videos. Stipe's been out for 3 years. His last fight was a KO loss. And I've seen a lot of people saying that he's going to be chinny and shit, which I don't really necessarily agree with that. I know he took a bad KO loss to the hardest puncher in the sport. We've seen plenty of people take vicious KO losses and come back fine. And we never, that was his last fucking fight. So we don't know how his chin is. I think he'll be able to take some punishment off of Jones. I don't see him just getting flatlined by the first clean shot that he eats from Jones. Although if it is a knee, an elbow, or a head kick, he could get put out by that. But straights and hooks and whatnot, any punches from Jones, I don't think they're going to fucking flatline Miocic. So I'm probably going to go decision for Jones. He could get a finish earlier. Stipe's never been submitted, so I don't see that happening. Even though he does oftentimes end up in north-south, and Jones can take advantage of that. He's really good at finding a guillotine like he did against Cyril Gane. Stipe puts himself in too many positions to where Jones can take advantage of and win from there. Here's praying that Stipe manages to flatline Jones. That would be the best ending to a fight ever. But not going to happen, I don't think.